Welcome back. Today we've got something special just for you.
We really do.
We are taking a deep dive into some truly profound excerpts from a text called The Inner Symphony, A Divine Path to Eternal Joy.
It's an incredible piece of writing.
It really is.
Yeah.
And our mission for this deep dive is to explore the massive difference between the temporary, kind of fleeting happiness we all tend to chase every single day.
Right, the day-to-day stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To contrast that with the eternal joy that mystics across centuries have described. But more importantly, we're going to discover how this text says we can actually tune our own internal instruments to find it.
Yeah, which is a beautiful text to examine, especially because it addresses something so universal.
Yeah.
I mean, we all want to be happy.
Right.
But this source asks us to take a really hard look at what kind of happiness we're actually settling for and what might be waiting for us if we look just a little deeper.
And the text opens with this incredible anecdote that sets the stage perfectly. It talks about a time a while back when musicians across the UK were invited to join the National Youth Orchestra.
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
Right. The invitation was brilliantly simple. Just pick up whatever instrument you have, step out onto your balcony or into your living room, and share in a massive collective performance of Beethoven's Ode to Joy.
Just a huge community effort.
Exactly. It was intended as a gesture of solidarity, really dedicated specifically to people in society who might be in need of a musical pick-me-up during a time of worldwide challenge.
It was this spontaneous, nationwide surge of empathy.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because while a physical, musical pick-me-up is wonderful, the text quickly shifts gears to ask a much bigger question. Aren't we all in need of a divine musical pick-me-up? If physical music can lift our hearts that much, what could eternal music do?
And that is the core contrast the text establishes right from the beginning. The author makes a very clear distinction between what they call transient joy and an ineffable permanent joy.
Right?
Transient joy is exactly what it sounds like. It's the good feeling we get when the script of our lives includes, good times.
Yeah.
It's completely circumstantial. It happens when things go our way, when we get the promotion, when the weather is nice, or when we're recognized by our peers.
Right. It's like the joy of finding an extra fry at the bottom of the takeout bag.
Exactly.
It's fantastic for about 10 seconds, but it doesn't exactly sustain your soul through a hard winter.
That is a very accurate, if slightly greasy, way to look at it.
Huh. Yeah.
But transient joy is fundamentally dependent on the outside world cooperating with your plans. But the permanent joy they're talking about is completely different.
How so?
It's described as a joy that fills the heart when it's seeking the divine. So it's entirely independent of your external circumstances.
Wow.
You could be experiencing the worst day of your career, and yet, according to this text, this permanent joy remains entirely untouched.
And I think that's exactly why this matters so much for you listening right now. Just think about the modern world we're navigating.
It's intense.
It really is. We are living in an era of constant low-grade anxiety. There is absolute information overload, and we're constantly chasing these tiny, fleeting dopamine hits from our phones or our daily routines.
We're conditioned to seek out those extra fries, basically.
Exactly. So the stakes here are incredibly high. How do we actually access this permanent joy that the text is talking about? How do we get off the treadmill of temporary happiness?
What's fascinating here is how the text synthesizes descriptions of this permanent joy from various mystics and traditions. It's not just one perspective.
Right, it pulls from all over.
Yeah, it's a unified chorus from people who have dedicated their lives to this pursuit. They all describe this joy as an absolute infallible sign of the divine.
Like the quote from the French philosopher.
Yes, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, he was a Jesuit priest, and he says outright, joy is the infallible sign of the presence of God.
That's a strong statement.
It is. And then it brings in Mother Teresa, who expanded on that by saying, joy is prayer, joy is strength, joy is love.
I love that line from Mother Teresa. She isn't saying joy is a byproduct of prayer.
No.
She's saying the joy is the prayer. That completely flips the script on how we usually view solemn spiritual practices.
It really does. And we see a very similar sentiment from Hazur Maharaj Ji, who describes the spiritual path of Sant Mat as a path of joy, success, and eternal bliss.
Let me stop you right there because I want to make sure we don't lose anyone in the terminology. For someone who might not be familiar with the text's specific references, what exactly is Saint Mat?
That is a great clarifying question. Saint Mat translates roughly to the path of the saints, or path of the masters.
Okay.
It's a spiritual movement with roots in the Indian subcontinent. It emphasizes the necessity of a living spiritual master and the practice of inner meditation.
Inner meditation meaning.
Specifically, listening to the inner sound and seeing the inner light to achieve realization of the divine.
Got it.
So when Hazur Maharaj Ji calls it a path of joy and eternal bliss, he's speaking from a tradition that views the divine not as a distant judge, but as a current of love and joy that you can directly experience.
That context makes the text's description of this internal treasure even more powerful. It acknowledges that human words ultimately fail to capture it, but it tries to paint a picture anyway.
And the imagery is stunning.
It really is. It asks how you can possibly describe a light that's more radiant than a million suns and moons.
Right.
Or a sound that is so utterly captivating, it literally takes your breath and your ego, your sense of self, away.
That's hard to even conceptualize.
Yeah. It describes an intensity of love that obliterates all feelings of separateness and a presence so energizing and enveloping that you merge into an ocean of bliss beyond time and space. That is a far cry from the momentary thrill of checking off your to-do list.
It's a completely different magnitude of experience. And the text points out that the mission of these mystics, these lovers of God, is to bring us to the realization that this treasure is not just something hidden deep inside of us like a buried chest of gold.
It's not just a prize to find.
Exactly. It is actually who and what we are in reality. The text uses a beautiful, profound metaphor. It says, the drop is of the same essence as the ocean.
I want to linger on that for a second. The drop is of the same essence as the ocean.
Yeah.
If I'm understanding this correctly, the text is suggesting that we aren't just containers holding a little spark of the divine.
Right.
We are made of the exact same substance as the infinite divine itself. We are the joy.
That's the core philosophical shift the text is asking the reader to make. You're not searching for something foreign to your nature. You're trying to uncover your actual nature.
But that brings us to the most practical, pressing question for anyone listening today.
Which is?
Well, it sounds amazing to say we're drops of the divine ocean, but my morning commute doesn't feel very divine.
Fair point.
How do we actually tap into this? How do we reach it on a practical level?
The source material is very specific about the method. It tells us that this joy is definitely not going to be found by rearranging the furniture of your outside world.
You can't just buy it.
No, you cannot buy it, achieve it, or travel to it. Instead, it's found in stillness. It's found in meditation and communion with the Creator. The text outlines a rigorous process of training the mind.
Training it how?
It involves concentrating at what they call the eye center.
Okay, I have to play the proxy for the listener here. When the text says concentrating at the eye center, are we talking about literally crossing our eyes to look at the bridge of our nose? What does that actually mean?
I'm glad you asked,
Yeah.
because taking that literally would just give you a massive headache.
Right.
In the context of this mystical tradition, the eye center doesn't refer to the physical eyes. It refers to a focal point of consciousness. It's often described as being located metaphorically between and slightly above the eyebrows. It's considered the seat of the soul, or the center of consciousness in the waking state.
So it's an internal focal point.
Exactly. The text is instructing the practitioner to gather their scattered attention, which is usually running out into the world through the five senses, and bring it to a singular point of focus within.
That makes much more sense. It's about withdrawing attention, not physical gymnastics.
Correct. And to achieve that withdrawal, the text mentions engaging in specific practices taught by a master. Specifically, it mentions absorbing oneself in Simran and Bhajan.
Let's define those two, because the text leans heavily on them as the actual mechanics of this joy.
Simran essentially means repetition or remembrance. In this context, it's the mental repetition of specific words or names given by a master, used as a tool to keep the mind occupied and focused at that eye center.
So it gives the mind a job to do.
Yes. Think of it like giving a hyperactive dog a bone to chew on so it stops running around the house.
That's a great analogy.
And Bhajan, on the other hand, refers to the practice of listening. Once the mind is stilled through Simran, Bhajan is the act of tuning in to hear the inner sound current. The divine melody that the text argues is constantly reverberating within us.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the text frames this inward turn, this Simran and Bhajan, as a very specific exchange. It says we need to attach ourselves to the word, that inner sound current, in order to detach ourselves from the world. That phrasing really sticks with me.
It's powerful.
You aren't just dropping your worldly attachments into a vacuum, which sounds terrifying and impossible. You are letting go of the world by grabbing onto something much more substantial.
That is a crucial psychological insight from the text.
Yeah.
Human beings cannot simply detach from something through sheer willpower alone.
No, nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. We have to be drawn away by something more attractive.
Yeah.
The text supports this concept with some brilliant cross-cultural references, showing that this idea of detaching from the worldly by attaching to the divine is a universal spiritual principle.
Like what?
For example, it points to an unknown psalmist in the Bible who marvels with gratitude to the Lord, saying, "You have given more joy to my heart than they have, whose grain and wine are increased."
Grain and wine being the ultimate symbols of material wealth at the time.
Yes.
Today, that would be like saying, you have given me more joy than the guy who just got a massive stock payout and a yacht.
That is the perfect modern translation, yes. The psalmist is finding a joy in the Lord's light that completely eclipses the joy of material abundance.
Right.
And then, the text pairs that biblical perspective with a passage from the great Sufi mystic Rumi from his work The Diwani-Shamsi Tabrisi.
Oh, Rumi is always so poetic.
Always. He assures his readers that if you can manage to detach yourself from the worries of the world, you will feel joy and pleasure in the Garden of Eternity. The text is drawing a straight line through wildly different traditions to make one point. Worldly detachment leads to eternal joy.
I have to push back a bit here, though, on behalf of our listeners. It's so easy to read detached from the world in a beautiful poem, but in everyday reality, we have real worries.
We do.
People listening to this have mortgages, they have kids who need to go to school, they have demanding bosses and health issues. If I tell my boss I'm detaching from worldly affairs to sit in the Garden of Eternity, I'm going to get fired.
Yeah, that won't go over well.
So how does the text reconcile this concept of detaching with the reality of living a normal human life?
It's a vital distinction to make. The text does not advocate for running away to a cave or neglecting your responsibilities.
Okay, good.
It doesn't deny that these worldly worries exist, and it certainly doesn't claim your life will suddenly become easy. Instead, it quotes Hazur urging practitioners that they have to rise above these things internally.
Internally.
Right. The detachment is mental and emotional, not necessarily physical. You still go to work, you still care for your family, but your anchor, your ultimate source of joy, is no longer tied to the outcomes of those activities.
That makes sense.
The text emphasizes that even someone in the weakest state of health or the busiest state of life can engage in these inner practices of Simran and Bhajan. The spiritual practice doesn't require worldly perfection or isolation. It requires an inner shift of focus.
So it's about where you're sourcing your identity. You're acting in the world, but you are not of it, to borrow another famous phrase.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text is actually reframing the entire purpose of human life.
How so?
It argues that this human form is not just a biological accident. It's a precious gift conferred upon us for one sole purpose, to give us the opportunity to return to our true home of everlasting peace and bliss.
Wow.
It completely changes how you view your time on earth. It's not about accumulating the grain and the wine or climbing the corporate ladder. It's about utilizing this human instrument to make the journey home.
That journey home is described so powerfully in a letter from Hazur that the text quotes. He writes to a student on the path, an initiate, and says that they have been given the passport to go back to your own home where your Supreme Father is waiting to receive you.
A passport.
A passport. I love that analogy. It implies that the borders are open. You have the documentation, the permission, the absolute guarantee of entry. He goes on to ask, what greater joy or blessing could someone have in this world of misery and suffering?
The contrast he draws in that letter is striking. He advises the initiate to keep their final goal in sight, the treasures and joys awaiting them, and to keep their thoughts anchored in Simran and Bhajan.
Right.
But the most radical part of that letter is when he tells the student, do not worry about anything in this life, which is all an unpleasant dream.
Calling life an unpleasant dream.
Yeah. Framing the waking worldly life with all its triumphs and tragedies as merely an unpleasant dream compared to the reality of the spiritual home is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is.
It tells the reader that the permanence they're desperately looking for is never going to be found in the dream state of the material world.
That idea of the world falling away in the face of the divine reminds me of an anecdote in the text that really stopped me in my tracks. I was hoping you could walk us through it, the story about Hazrat Inayat Khan and his friend by the fire.
It is one of the most poignant moments in the source material. Hazrat Inayat Khan, a prominent Sufi teacher, recounts a time in his book, The Way of Illumination, when he was sitting with a companion who had a deep habit of meditation.
Okay.
They were just sitting near a fire, chatting normally, and suddenly his companion went completely still and entered into the silence of meditation.
Just right there.
Right there. Inayat Khan recognized what was happening and simply sat quietly, waiting until his friend finally returned and opened his eyes. When he did, Inayat Khan gently asked him about the meditation, saying, "It is beautiful, is it not?"
And the friend's reply is devastatingly profound in its simplicity.
It is. He just says, "It is never enough."
It is never enough. That gave me chills when I read it, because it isn't a statement of dissatisfaction or greed.
No, not at all.
It's something else entirely.
It captures the infinite nature of this joy perfectly. It isn't a finite resource that you consume and then feel full, like a meal.
Right.
Inayat Khan concludes from that experience that for those who actually experience the true joy of meditation, there is absolutely nothing in this physical world that can compete. They touch something that cannot be explained in words absolute perfection.
Your inner spirit of light, of life, and of love.
And when you touch the infinite,
Of course it's never enough, because it's boundless. You can never reach the end of an ocean.
that boundlessness is such a huge theme here. And it seems to culminate in the text when it brings in a reference to St. John. Can you explain how the text uses that specific biblical framework to drive this point home?
The text references the Gospel of John, specifically exploring the relationship between Jesus and his disciples.
Okay.
It focuses on the moments when Jesus is preparing his disciples for their future spiritual development, especially knowing they will soon experience the deep pain of physical separation from their master.
The explanation the text highlights is incredibly moving. It frames the divine presence saying, "I am so much in love with you that my love will always be pulling you to my level."
Pulling you to my level. It implies an active, magnetic force from the divine side, not just us clawing our way up.
And notice the effect of that magnetic pull according to the text. It promises that their happiness will know no bounds when they finally meet the master within themselves at that eye center we discussed earlier.
So that internal meeting point.
Yes. It says that when that inner meeting happens, you will absolutely forget all your trials and sorrows. The inner joy and indescribable happiness will be so fulfilling, so dense, that there will literally be no room left for anything else.
Wow.
The worldly worries we were debating earlier, the mortgages, the stress, they're not just managed or coped with through some psychological trick. They are entirely crowded out by the sheer volume of divine love.
So what does this all mean? If we bring this deep dive full circle back to where we started, back to that incredible musical metaphor of the National Youth Orchestra and the societal pick-me-up.
Right, the orchestra on the balconies.
Yeah. We began by talking about people consuming music, stepping out onto their balconies, and needing a temporary lift to get through a hard, frightening time in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end of this text, the perspective has completely flipped. We aren't just the tired audience needing a pick-me-up. According to the source, we are the musicians.
We are. The text quotes a beautiful line asserting that every man is a golden instrument of the divine orchestra from which arises the melody of the Spirit.
A golden instrument.
It states that by giving us this human form, the Creator has actively chosen us to be his instruments.
Just think about that for a second. Your actual human life, your consciousness, your daily existence is a golden instrument specifically designed for a divine orchestra.
It's an incredibly empowering way to view your life, especially on days when you feel anything but golden.
Absolutely.
This raises an important question, though. An instrument, no matter how beautifully crafted or golden, does not play itself.
Right. It can't just sit in the case.
Exactly. It cannot sit in its case and produce a symphony. The text makes it abundantly clear that the responsibility is ours. It tells the reader that it is up to us to pick up our instrument, which is our own consciousness, and to tune it perfectly through these rigorous practices of stillness, meditation, simran, bhajan.
The tuning is the practice.
It is up to us to actually play the music, to play his ode to joy. It requires active daily participation. The joy might be our fundamental essence, yes, but the tuning of the instrument is our daily work.
Which leaves us with a fascinating challenge. We've explored how this text contrasts the fleeting, circumstantial happiness of the world with the permanent, eternal joy of the divine. We've looked at how mystics from various traditions urge us to turn our attention inward, to find a way to detach from our worldly worries by attaching to something far greater, and to tune our consciousness to that inner sound and light.
The journey.
It really is. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today as you go back into your busy life, back to the emails and the errands. If your consciousness is literally an instrument designed to play the eternal ode to joy, What specific background noise in your daily life is currently knocking it out of tune?
That's a great question.
And what might happen if, just for today, you stop trying to play louder than all that noise and simply listen to the silence beneath it? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and above all, keep your instruments tuned.